So I guess we can kind of get started. Why don't you introduce yourselves to the people, to the viewers? Let's start with Eunice.
Hi, everyone. Nice to have you here. It's a great Friday afternoon, and I'm looking forward to spending 2 hours here with our collective friends. My name is Eunice. I'm the founder of Enlight, and essentially it's an industry-wide program that helps professionals start and succeed in their esports career, especially on the business side. So I was just telling Nate, if you missed it, that, for people like myself, where I just can't become a pro player or a streamer to save my life, I have spent 10 years building up big companies on the business side in esports. And the number one problem I always see is essentially, people asking me, how do I get into esports? Well, it's hard to get into esports if you don't know where you fit in, right? And so that's exactly the problem I'm tackling with Enlight, where I bring in esports leaders to teach master classes about every single job on the business side that you could possibly think about in esports. So everything from business development to account management to social media to content production, broadcast, literally anything you can think of. And understanding that is the first step in understanding where you can even fit in and how you can develop your skills in the industry. And previous to this, I actually was a founding executive at Cloud9 Esports. So I helped them build every single team on the business side from the ground up. All of the things I mentioned, I touched. So business development, accounts, all of that I touched. And I'm still an advisor with Cloud9, so we have a couple projects maybe in the works. And previous to Cloud9, I actually ran Riot Games' event department back in 2013. So I built the event strategy for Riot Games when they were just starting to do sports stadium events. So if you remember the Staples Center event that was the World Championships, I was the one running that with a chicken, like my head cut off, backstage. So it was great and fascinating, and I love seeing the industry grow. And I'm really at a point within Enlight where I want to give back to the industry and all of you here. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Dan, you made it. So we were just introducing ourselves. So let's have Nate go, and then you can kind of collect yourself and then introduce yourself next.
Eunice, does that mean that you're my new contact to get angry at for Cloud9 cutting their CSGO team?
Oh my goodness, I have nothing to do with that.
Anyway, thank you. My name is Nate Meeker. I'm the director of esports at the University of Akron. We're based out of Ohio. We're a mid-sized D1 school, about 20,000 undergraduate students. Esports program here at Akron has about 2,500 students involved. We do the varsity side of things, the club side of things, the recreational side of things, and then we also have co-curricular programs as well. My background is primarily in higher education. I graduated with an undergrad degree in education about 20 years ago now. At the time, I had some aspirations to play video games, maybe at a higher level. There wasn't really a whole lot of anything going on about 20 years ago. We did the whole traveling around thing, played out of various hotel conference centers and all the glory that went around with sleeping in a hotel room with 4 or 5 other people, as you do. But there wasn't really a professional side to it as there was, or as there is now. So I transitioned into a career in education, ended up doing graduate work at University of Southern California, and then have been in the realm of higher education, either doing curriculum development or on the lecturing side of things, primarily with education classes for the last 10 or 12 years now. Transitioned into a career in esports because I still had a passion for it, and higher education was something that I was good at, something that I knew. So when universities started hiring for these higher education jobs, maybe 3.5, 4 years ago, I threw my hat into the ring. Luckily enough, was picked up at Akron to kind of help start the program here, along with the 2 other gentlemen who are now at different universities. And the program's just kind of grown and taken off with the industry surrounding collegiate esports. It's been a really interesting career. So hopefully I can help talk to some folks today about what that pathway has looked like, some of the opportunities that might be out there for students, and then maybe how those programs might be built at various universities, because I know that there's going to be folks at various levels when they're looking at building these programs.
great. Thank you so much for that. I also started college thinking maybe something about esports would take me into there. So Suzanne, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Hi, I was the head of the IGDA Game Ed SIG for 10 long years. And I left last year and it went over to Ryan Bound, who'd been my curriculum writing partner, and he's at Utah. I started with game curriculum because my master's degree was actually before video game studies was a thing. So I did video game studies in 02 to 05, which was really challenging since you didn't know. I was at UT Austin and you just didn't know who to talk to. So I started a curriculum conference in 05 to kind of, or I don't know, at some point, to help people, to help universities develop curriculum for, game education programs. And I've just kind of been working in video game curriculum ever since. Now I am the co-founder and CEO. My area of expertise in video games is actually in serious games. That's what I lecture on. And so I have founded a company where we're creating serious games to help people in the wellness tech space.
So the first question is something that everyone here can kind of answer, chime in about. So what challenges are there to building a collective consensus on esports and game development curriculum? And how does this impact learning engagement opportunities? How do students attempt to compensate for that? We can take it one step at a time with the question. It was a bit of a loaded question. So what challenges are there to building a collective consensus on esports and game development curriculum?
I'm like Nate.
I mean, I'm happy to go first. It's fine with me. So for me, for us, because we're exploring those pathways right now. Now, our focus isn't necessarily on the game design side of things, but there's still similar issues that come up. So one, the biggest issue for developing any type of curriculum within the realm of higher education is always funding. So funding is issue number one, and every college and then college within a college is going to ask, where is the funding coming from to develop the curriculum behind this? Some of the times, game developers or software developers are interested in being part of that funding, depending on what that looks like. But that's always issue number one. We've started working through that on some of our internal projects currently, where we've got professors that are doing it for a passion project, where it's something that they're interested in. So they're developing curriculum in hopes that more students will be taking these classes. But I think a lot of it boils down to the connections within an industry looking to build students' careers while they're still in school, maybe giving them experience with different softwares or working within different spaces to graduate folks that are familiar with the areas that they want them to be familiar with. Because let's be honest, a lot of the tools that students are using in currently existing programs are dated. By the time they graduate, a lot of the times, a company or corporation may be looking for them to utilize new tools or tools that have recently come out in the last 4, 5, 10 years. Those are not always the tools that programs have tailored their curriculum to, because they've been using the same curriculum for the last 10 or 15 years. This is big school and small school problem alike. So creating that curriculum, maybe if it's a free resource or it's a resource that colleges can share, or if it's a resource that the companies who develop these softwares are interested in investing in, I think that's really issue number one, or at least it has been for a lot of colleges that I've talked to.
And speaking to the curriculum side of things, as far as the tools and technology that are available, that's something that we always talk to universities about, not being reliant on the technology, because the technology is moving way faster than most universities can update to, right? So we need to teach students a skill set that's not reliant on the technology so that they can speed up into whatever program, product, whatever it is that they need to launch into, depending on the company and where that company is technologically. Some companies are, EA is much further ahead than a smaller game company, especially with like the mobile game space.
Yeah, and I'm not in the college. I guess I'm speaking as an outsider, and so I didn't want to go first. So I'm really glad for the insightful answers, Nate and Suzanne, that you have. I've been speaking with different colleges because I am literally building an industry-wide curriculum for esports professionals. And it's really interesting how there's different approaches, right? Some people really focus on the competitive side, some others focus on the community and the engagement, others focus on the curriculum and trying to place their students in jobs. And, for me, the curriculum is the most important thing. And the way I've been looking at curriculum is I never did well personally in school in that it's hard for me to take something theoretical. I think I had to do a computer science algorithms class that I almost failed twice. It's hard for me to take that into applying it into the real world. And with esports specifically, which is what I'm working on curriculum for, it's an industry that moves so fast and changes literally by the month and, sometimes by the day even, that there are underlying skill sets, but it's all about doing and getting that experience and learning from that. It's really hard to apply conceptual kind of things to something that is such a fast moving industry, right? Maybe it's different for a more technical, deep craft, right? That takes years to learn. But with esports, it's really about what the trends are, what is happening in the industry, and how do you stay relevant and popular, right? And so for me, a lot of the curriculum we go through is very tangible things like, we have a broadcast and production masterclass, for example. And so some of the things we talk about are, hey, what are the documents that you need for running a live broadcast? Like, where do you even start? What does pre-production look like? What are the 5 documents you need? Let's say the run of show document, what needs to be in a run of show document for a broadcast, right? How do we take these kinds of templates and these kinds of real world tangible knowledge and exercises and bring them into colleges? And so students can literally apply that to their real life projects, to their esports clubs projects, to any volunteer opportunities or internship opportunities we provide them, and really get that hands-on experience that they can put on their resume. Because right now the biggest problem is, maybe some colleges have, let's say, esports management certificates, but when hiring managers inside the industry see that on someone's resume, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It maybe signals that they have an interest in esports, but it doesn't signal exactly what they've learned and what kind of projects they've literally hands-on developed, right? So I think a big challenge is trying to trying to have students get that kind of training that the hiring managers are looking for and literally making that connection versus general education, which is more conceptual and larger and like a bigger foundation, which doesn't necessarily translate always to, okay, how can you start tomorrow and help us on this project, right, at this company? So I think for me, that's the biggest challenge I'm trying to bridge with the classes that I'm building.
I think everyone brought up a lot of really interesting points. Speaking as like a recent college graduate, I guess, in this group. So my college didn't have necessarily a dedicated esports or game design curriculum. It kind of did, but it was hidden very, very well. And any student who basically really wanted to go into game design education, a lot of the times the most common story was, I didn't even know it existed, and now I'm already a junior. It feels kind of too late. maybe I'll try again for like a master's, or maybe I'll just take 1 or 2 classes here and there and try to see where that takes me. But basically, because it's not well advertised enough in the college setting, a lot of students just missed out on the opportunity, even though I knew a lot of college friends who were very, very interested in game design, but they didn't even know that it was offered. So they went into things that were kind of close, where it was like art, creative writing, computer science, most commonly. So yeah, I definitely think it's been one of the major issues that like not appropriate funding for like the majors advertisements, because even just by looking at what the major was called at my college, it was called integrated media. and you'd never really think that it had anything to do with game design until you actually took a moment to really dive deep into the classes that integrated media offered, and you were kind of just like, oh hey, I can learn a lot about game design through like these specific classes. So if like I were to take these classes each semester, I'd be able to basically learn as much as I would from, let's say, maybe NYU. But it was never really advertised. And so it was very difficult for people to kind of get into the field that they really wanted to go into. So this kind of leads into the next question. Hopefully we can talk a little bit more about it. Just let's discuss a little bit more about the impact these kind of learning environments kind of create. Because obviously a lot of students end up struggling. And so because maybe the opportunities to dive into the esports world is not as available, a lot of students end up trying to compensate for that. They end up trying to take up like volunteer opportunities from one area or another, and then they don't really get that full college experience where it's like guiding them. What can you guys really say about that?
I could talk a little bit about how we've tried to address that here at Akron, and I've seen other institutions do similar things. So we've tried to do it in 2 ways. One, we've tried to look at the field as a whole and see where are the jobs actually at. We do a lot of recruiting. When I go and talk to high school students or younger right now and ask them about esports and gaming, they're interested, but the answer you'll typically get will be something along the lines of, oh, I want to design games, or I want to be a game tester or something like that. And sure, you know, there's some fantastic jobs out there in the game design field, but that is not necessarily where the vast majority of these careers are going. And so we just try and design the program around the careers that are currently out there, mostly in the realm of management or social media management, event management, as well as event hosting, tournament organizing, and things of that nature. And so what we try and do is we give students that are part of the program, no matter if they're working for the program or they're volunteering for the program, the opportunity to get a hands-on experience with this event creation side of things. So they're doing the event creation with guidance, obviously. They're doing the broadcasting, they're doing the streaming, they're designing all the panels that go behind everything, they're managing the social media for the event, they're managing the outreach with a lot of hand-holding, they're managing the financial outreach and impact of the event as well, with a lot of hand-holding there. So going through and contacting a sponsor, what does that look like? What does the legal proposal look like? How do you have to talk to marketing about it? And every step of the way working them through that, because it's not really an experience that they're going to get in the classroom most of the time. This is an experiential learning opportunity for them. So we create those positions. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid, where students are going to come in and be able to get an experience that is otherwise impossible for them to get. You can't just walk up to an esports org, especially a relatively large one, and say, hey, I'd like to do an event for you. It doesn't work like that. But it can when you're in college. If you're a student that's in college and you have a relatively large esports organization or even a smaller esports organization, there are opportunities for you to get experiential learning while you're going to school. And heck, you're paying to go to school. You might as well get those opportunities now, right? So for us, it's about that outside of the classroom experience to be able to give students, regardless of what their major is, a way to connect and a way to put something else on their resume that isn't, I graduated with a degree in XYZ.
I'm actually surprised that you had a hard time finding the game design program, because a lot of universities use that as a huge funding asset for the university. They particularly either start a game program or grow a game program because it draws so many students and it makes the school money.
For us, for whatever reason, when we're looking at curriculum, the number one thing that the university always asks is, what is the graduation to employment ratio going to look like for that particular job? And for game design, Akron's not known for game design. So we don't have a name in the field that says we're graduating out students that are going to be excellent in game design. There certainly are universities that are perfect for that. For us, that just didn't fit. So we looked to do other career pathways that we were already known for, knowing that if we give these students an experience and we give them a great education, a great education at what we do well now, and we add in the experience for the esports component, they're going to be highly employable. And that has been the case. We've graduated a huge number of students that have gone into education fields afterwards in the realm of esports. Same with event management on the business side of things.
So just to interrupt, Jeff is here with us now. So why don't you just introduce yourself, and we will continue the conversation about games education.
Well, thank you so much. And I apologize for being late. I just got out of class. So, my day job comes first. So I teach at Oklahoma City University, and I'm the chair of game design and animation. And we have a program that it's a 4-year bachelor degree with scholarshiping for game design and animation. And then I also am the director of esports here at OCU. So I run a program, and we have a coordinator. So they do most of the boots on the ground activity day to day, and I work more fundraising and corporate partnerships and things like that. So it has worked pretty well at our school, and I've been teaching video game design now for an animation for about 25 years. So thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. So we were just talking about the challenges that it took to have a consensus on esports and game development curriculum. And what we just finished discussing was just the impact this had on students who were trying to kind of pave their way in the game design and esports industry, and how it kind of affects the way that they try to seek like internships or experiences, because some universities do lack funding. Not every university, unfortunately, is lucky enough to have like dedicated programs, and we were kind of just wanted to bring some insight to that situation. So if you have anything that you'd like to share, or if you just would like to share anything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I've been teaching game design and animation for a long time, and I've been only doing esports for probably 2 years now, as part of this new job that I took at this university. And we're still in our infancy in terms of our academic program in esports. We do have a 4-year degree. We got that approved about 6 months ago. And so we do have our first group of students that are getting their degree in esports, but it's actually over in our journalism and mass communication department. So we don't split it together. I teach game design and animation in art. We also have a game programming degree over in computer science, and then we have the esports marketing and management degree within within mass communications. So it's a little bit different for us. And I would say, I don't have a lot of students in my gaming animation that say play for our team on our varsity team. Most of my gaming animation students are not as competitive as my players on my varsity teams are. And they do play video games, but it's more casual or storytelling type of video games. And so, as far as education is concerned, I know one of the things that we have an issue with is just sort of the hurdle of technology. And I think that's, from both areas, understanding when you're doing esports production or casting and, setting up all the systems, there's a little bit of technical know-how that you're going to be needing to know to set up the tournaments and be a TO and those types of things. And as far as gaming and animation, our first 2 years really are learning all the applications that are involved in game design. So we're learning Unity and Unreal and Maya and Marvelous Designer and all the digital sculpting with ZBrush. And so once that we kind of can get past that first 2 years of technology, and I don't know how that is yet with esports, but once we get past that 2 years, that's really when our students start to really become artists and storytellers and able to talent is once they really understand those applications.
Thank you. Eunice, so with your work with Enlight.gg, have you noticed any kind of like, I'm losing the word for it, but have you noticed any trends in terms of like students or like people that you work with? Is it safe to say that a lot of the opportunities seem to fall along the West Coast as opposed to East Coast as what is generally expected, I guess, for lack of a better word?
I would say yes in a nutshell. However, a lot of these companies are digital, right? Gaming is, especially esports, is digital first. And so a lot of the people, even with the past year in COVID, have been remote. And remote workers are becoming a lot more accepted, especially in esports. Like I myself work remote for all 5 years when I was with Cloud9. Surprisingly. And it was, it was great. And it just depends on the company really and your role and what you're doing. Obviously, when flights come back and things like that, it'll be a lot easier to work remotely because you could just fly in. Whereas now it's probably even tougher. So yes, most of the opportunities are on the West Coast. If you're working for big companies, they probably want you in the office. But when you're working with startups and smaller companies that move fast and pivot fast, like it's totally acceptable to be remote. So
I think that would be that's a little relieving to hear because that's one of the most common complaints that I hear from students who are interested in games. They feel like they've been like rooted in the East Coast, rooted in New York City, and they're not really sure if they would ever kind of just uproot themselves to go to California where the big opportunities are. And so they always feel kind of stuck. So that's actually quite a nice thing to hear.
yeah. And I think the great thing with Enlight is the curated community that we have is all around people who are career focused and trying to be on the same career journey in this sense, right? And so there's so many things out there, like so many orgs, like, gosh, I'm trying to name a couple, but like NBA 2K is out in Florida. I can't even, there's a ton of different like Overwatch teams out in, Chicago, for example, and Texas. And I'm at a loss right now, but there are so many in which they have opportunities in, but it's hard to have like a central place of resources in that sense. And with the community, we specifically have a channel where people share their resources and job openings and things like that. It's all very career focused. And so it's just information sharing, really.
That's really great to hear. So this next question's directed more towards Suzanne, but feel free to chime in if you feel that there's something that you want to say in regards to it. So we've come a long way pertaining to games place in higher education. What did the IGDA curriculum framework originally set out to do versus what were the major changes that were made in the 2020 revision?
The curriculum framework originally set out to help universities create game programs because there were maybe 2 or 5, and there was a lot of confusion about what it is that you actually should be teaching students because it was an entirely new, it's still a very nascent area of academia. It's, you know, we're still constantly growing, reiterating, understanding, especially considering how fast moving games are, right? The technology is insane. And so it's done an excellent job of helping universities look at, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to be teaching these people? You know, what kind of math, what kind of programming. The changes that we made were really to make it more global and more scalable depending on the type of university. So we created pretty much what we refer to as an underpinning for the program, for programs to kind of think about. And those are common language, where one of the challenges is that students will enter into a game program and some of them will understand certain terms and some of them won't. And if your program is predicated on like first-person shooters being the top tier of games, or, you know, we're looking at the esports coming out of EA, right? Like that's what we're gonna make the top tier. Well, all the students who played, you know, the dress-up fighting games or anime games are not going to be knowledgeable about that language. So our initial foundation, thank you, Jeff. Our initial foundation is common language. And then second is foundational knowledge. And that's also based on like the history and location of the actual space that you're physically in. Nate was saying like at Akron, they're not known for their game program. Their game program has to be able to adjust and adapt to where they are physically located. That's super important. And for a while, all schools were trying to be the same. And that's insane because everyone's not going to go work for a AAA studio, for one thing. And Dakota University, most of their students actually leave and go to like the federal government. They go and do programming at the federal government. And so, but they have this like beautiful set of skills where they can use that. And then we also talk about collaboration, because the problem is that there's so much conversation about how everyone in gaming needs to collaborate, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is that a lot of the times the collaboration isn't equitable. What you end up, if you look, I mean, I have lectured at so many schools where the teams are divided into a bunch of dudes doing a shooter game, and literally everyone else is working on, you know, a dress-up fighting game. And that's not collaboration. You're not learning how to work across anything at that point. And that's where we talk about inclusion and diversity and the true reality of making teams work. It doesn't, and that kind of goes back to common language. It's actually a pyramid in a circle. It's a brilliant, Ryan designed a really awesome graphic. But they have to feed on each other, right? So the language has to feed on the knowledge, has to feed on the collaboration, so that you create a program that at its foundation is going to get your students a job, right? Because that's, thank you, Nate, because that's what you need. I don't need to go, when I was in grad school, they were like, you can just get a PhD. In what? There's no, even, there wasn't even a field for me to get a PhD in. And then what, right? So, like the last thing we need is 1,000 more PhDs. What we need is kids to go and get a job and live a happy life. And you can't do that if you've got this lack of equity, right? This where students who come out of one program are only able to work with people that are just like them, and students who come out of another program are able to work in a much wider field because they have a better grasp of how to human, right? And the kids who come out of a better rounded program are actually going to be better off in general. So that's what we're trying. And then there's also like the subject matter expertise, but that also slides. So there's nothing that's prescribed. We're not saying like everyone has to use Unity, because there are schools in South Africa where that's not part of their problem. That's just, they're doing a whole bunch of stuff with really different technology. So everything has to scale. And the best thing, I get very excited. The best thing is that universities globally are all on the same level. Like, we are all tracking because we're developing this new area, but with all together, and that's super fun. Yes, Jeff.
Have you noticed a change in job opportunities? Something I've noticed over the years, between at first, let's say 10 or 11, 12 years ago, the only opportunities for a game developer were maybe at a AAA studio. Whereas now, a lot of my students are getting jobs, and my job placement rate has gone up just because there's a lot more individuals in the local communities and the local market.
Actually, yeah. The thing is that as game education has become a bigger field and there's more understanding of gaming as a really high value area of knowledge, there's been a lot more understanding. Also, as more millennials get into positions of hiring, their understanding of gaming is very different and a bit more nuanced. And Gen X, like, as people understand sort of the field of video game creation for the vast, deep knowledge area it is, the better off we are. And I think like a lot of companies, like Unity's done a really great job of educating kind of the world as the larger world as understanding how everyone can benefit from gaming.
Yeah, I see that in esports as well. I think esports is a relatively new industry, very new industry compared to game development. But when it first started out, really the only jobs, I guess the only paid structural secure jobs you could get was with Riot Games, who actually invested money into an esports department. And from there, it's grown so much since 2013 even. Right now, because of the increased structure in these esports franchises and tournaments, which Riot Games started modernly, there are now esports teams that have funding and can hire a lot of people and grow in different ways. And from esports teams, there are different fan sort of shoot-offs, right? And so you have game analytics websites that are really analyzing competitions and really focus on the tech and data side of things. You have community organizations that work with these different influencers and build their community, and then talent managers and talent agencies on top of them. It's really just, you know, in the last 5 years, 7 years, we've seen 200% growth in esports professional jobs. And it's been insane growth, but it's also been really exciting because for a lot of students, they can now apply what they learn in school to something crazy and new like esports, right? So even if they study graphic design or art, well, esports communities and companies need graphic design, right? Very sort of basic kind of career roles you can think of, all of that exists in esports. So everything from graphic design to, you know, social media to running a production team and things like that. Like literally anything that exists in any other industry now exists in esports. So yes, I've also seen a similar growth as well. So it's been really exciting.
With that growth, I would, if there's any students or educators in the chat, I would caution that the competition is stronger now than it ever was before. You need to be better. The student needs to be better. If you've got the opportunity to get involved with whatever esports scene that there is or gaming scene at your college, at your high school, at your organization, get involved. As someone who hires folks into esports, if I go and I look, you were at a school that had a program and you weren't involved, that's a big red flag. You've got opportunities to do it that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. They exist now. Use those opportunities.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, to touch on that, I have more and more students now coming in that already know applications, that already know Maya, that, you know, there are programs that are popping up in their high schools, you know, to teach them gaming and animation programs, as well as, you know, they're starting to do esports, and, you know, they know how to run the software, they know how to make overlays and do the graphic design work needed for that. So to go along with what you're saying, Nate, I've been surprised. We've been looking for another coach, and I have been getting a lot of resumes from people that have no experience whatsoever in esports, and you know, they want a director. I mean, they want a head coaching job in esports, and I'm wondering, there's so many opportunities for you to get out there, and like you said, volunteer your services to get that experience. You know, why aren't you doing that? If you love esports that much, or if you love game design, go out there and volunteer your services to people, you know, until you get that experience under your belt.
So much for all of this. So Lexi has a question. Would you hire someone with coaching experience, just not in esports?
I was typing out an answer, but I can go ahead and answer it. From the higher education or education's perspective, yes, but with a huge caveat to that these jobs have hundreds or thousands of people applying for them, as Jeff mentioned. If other folks are applying that have your skills and the skills of esports, you're probably not even going to get an interview. And that's really where we're at right now, where these jobs they're in demand. And there are opportunities out there to enhance the skills that you have to put you in front of that job field. They're open, they're available. It's not closed off to folks. It does take time, it does take effort, it does take dedication, but if you're hiring into those positions, isn't that what you want to see anyway? You want to see that the folks have dedication to that they're offering their services, that they're trying to better themselves to be a better job applicant. So I would say possible, but very unlikely.
So actually, on that note, I was wondering, would you feel that it would be necessary for someone who is interested in coaching in esports if they coach like a very minor team, like not even very high leveled, or even teams that were participating, like who were actively participating in tournaments, would you say that that would still count as adequate experience, or would you kind of urge them to seek opportunities elsewhere that would resemble better experience? I'm not sure if that's like translating very well.
Yeah.
Jeff, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going through that exactly right now. Is that, we had 40, 45 people apply for the position, and there are some people that did have the sports experience. And as Nate said, it becomes a apples to oranges sort of comparison. Is at some point, okay, if I put this group of people in a pile and they all have experience, who has better experience, more quality experience, larger, group experience, and primarily too, what's tough with education is I'm comparing some people maybe that have been out in the pros or the semi-pros, and they've had no educational experience, but they have this very terrific, semi-pro experience, but I don't know how they would be as a teacher or as an instructor or somebody as a mentor, especially dealing with all the issues that we deal with in academia, talking about, equality and access and things like that, I don't know how they would do that. And then on the flip side, I have some academics that have been, with the program, but they have zero experience in the professional esports career because they've dedicated themselves to academics. So it's a tough scenario right now. I think in the long run, personally, we're going to see people graduating from these programs that will have academic experience and esports experience.
That's always my advice to folks. It doesn't matter the field. It doesn't matter if it's education, social media, management, game design, whatever it might be. Do the field that you want to get into excellently. Be able to speak about every aspect of that, and then get involved with esports. You don't have to be, if I'm hiring in a coach or if I'm hiring in a coordinator or something like that, you don't have to be the best world-class coach in the world, but you better know higher education. And the same is going to be true if you're being hired in to do social media for an esports organization. You better know social media really well. You don't need to be the most well-versed into every single aspect of whatever professional game it is. You should know esports. You should be able to talk about it. You should have some experience with a different organization, but do what you do really well, and then also have the esports experience and be able to talk about it. A lot of it is being able to relay your experience in an interview into a positive light with what they want to see. So the interview skills are really important. Being able to talk about how the experience you had could be a high school, could be at a college, could be anywhere. How does that experience relate to the job that you're going to do?
Thank you so much for that. Actually, since we're on the topic, on a similar level, so Eunice, we recognize that while college should be accessible to everyone, there are a lot of intersectional reasons that it's currently not. What challenges do you face attempting to create kind of like an effective learning opportunity for students that you serve at Inlight? Oh, you're muted.
Muted. Okay, I would say the biggest challenge is standardizing all the curriculum across all the different universities, right? And it sounds like, Suzanne, you've done a lot of work around that for a game dev. And I mean, esports is so new and changing so fast that it's hard to do that. And so, with Enlight, I've been able to just pull in the most relevant leaders that currently work in esports to teach those classes. And so, it's certainly relevant now, but we got to just keep up with what's happening. So I would say the biggest challenge is standardizing that for everyone, right? Like someone who has an esports management certificate from one university could have learned something completely different from a different university, and hiring managers don't know that. The hiring managers don't know what universities are teaching or offering. So seeing a certificate for esports or whatnot, which is still relatively new, may not mean anything to the hiring manager. And so we also want to avoid the problem of the student feeling like, what they studied didn't mean anything and didn't get them that job. And so how do we, again, bridge that gap and sort of standardize it? So yeah, I think it's a combination of everyone working together to figure it out, and just talking and having these kind of sessions to really understand, okay, what are you teaching? Like, should we have it? And Suzanne, you could probably speak to that a lot more than I can. But yeah, I've been having my own conversations with different universities, and even this session has been super insightful. So thank you.
Actually, on that note, how hopeful do you all feel about maybe having a more standardized curriculum for esports and game design across the country? Because in places like Canada, or like in Toronto, esports is huge there. Game design is huge there. They have budgets in their schools for all of this, and it's like really amazing what the difference is like. So what do you guys think of the potential for a standardized curriculum would be within the next coming years, or how long do you think it will take?
I think that a standardized curriculum across the US is really, really difficult. Even if you look at, engineering programs, right? Engineering is a well-established field, and you are going to learn something so different in an engineering program at University of Central Florida than you will at the University of Washington versus USC, right? Like, those are just widely differing areas, and that's why it's so beholden to, unfortunately, it's really beholden to students to get a really good sense of what it is that's offered at their school and how it works. And there's also this underpinning of pedagogy, how something is taught, right? Some programs are super competitive with like the students amongst each other. Some programs are like kumbaya, let's all sit down in a, speaking circle and feel love. And some programs are really dysfunctional for whatever reason. There's just, I hope it's kumbaya too, Jeff. I love that. And it's just so challenging because in the US, we are I think we all noticed we're a super fragmented country. So the academic arena is super fragmented as well. If you go look at New Zealand, they hired in a longtime American academic to run their game design program because it's just at one uni. They have one university that does game design in New Zealand. That's it. So it's, and yeah, Canada's super different with a lot of kumbaya, kind of no matter where you go. So that's a challenge.
My thought is along the same lines, is that I always tell students when they're coming around and visiting our university, no matter what school that they end up, they're going to get some sort of value from that university, even if it's, they go to university and they don't get a lot of support. That's going to teach them to, hey, you can do this on your own. And there's a lot of people that have been in the game industry or animation industry that have went out on their own and learned, from the grit. And I hate saying that, but, I don't want our school to be that way, but every university, I think, is going to give those a different experience. And when I went to grad school, me and my best friend, he went to the University of Chicago. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University. They were completely different grad schools, and he really thrived in the environment that was much more open and free, and they could really do anything they want to. My degree was much more structured in game design and graphic design and multimedia, and it was very helpful for me to have that experience. And so I agree totally with Suzanne, is that if a student is out there looking for a game program, it may be USC, it may be Full Sail, it may be a smaller program like ours or somewhere else, is that you're going to have to work hard no matter where you go, and you're going to have to get in there and learn the technologies, and be aware. Once again, I think you can't love your job unless you're really engaged in it. And probably Eunice would probably say the same thing about esports, is that you have to really be knowledgeable what's going on in the environment and what's legitimate for that time period.
Thank you all so much for that. So a question for Nate. How do your challenges in attempting to really establish the esports department at the University of Akron, how have they compared to what you've heard of from like other people's experiences, since you served as its former esports coordinator and now you're currently the director of esports?
Sure. So the challenges, there's a myriad of challenges within esports in higher education, but our challenges were a little bit different, to be totally honest. The challenges that we faced were primarily because the university launched a large-scale program when there wasn't a already functioning esports club on campus, which has kind of been the opposite of many programs that have started, where they've started from a large student organization, and then that large student organization fights and scratches and claws and gets a program created, gets funding, and we were kind of the opposite. So the students in our program don't always value the program for what it provides. It's one of the largest, most successful programs in the country, and we get a lot of students that take it for granted because they didn't have to fight for it. And I mean, I get it, right? But at the same time, they want a lot from the program, which is fine. They deserve to demand things of the program. But I look for students who also want to make things happen within the program, who want to, like we've talked about before, develop a career in it if that's what they're interested in. I can hand them experiences. I can hand them learning opportunities. I can't hand them a career. I can take their hand and guide them in the right pathway, but I can't always give them that career. I can do my best to make connections and help them along the way, but they've got to make the effort. And I think at some other schools, because the students fought for it, and this will change in 3 or 4 years when new students get there and the program's already established, but we're already experiencing that. So maybe we're experiencing an issue that will be there for these programs that are currently being developed by students in future years. From other schools, we've seen a couple of different things. So one is the placement of the program. That's always up in question. Is it an academic program? Does it get housed in academia? Does it get housed within athletics? Does it get housed within student life? And there's benefits across the board. I think it really depends on each individual institution. There's no blanket good answer. In some schools, it's going to fit well within athletics. In other schools, it's going to fit well under an academia tag. Under other schools, it's going to fit well within the side of student life or student affairs. It's just dependent on the makeup of the school and how they're managing the budget for the program. And then the question is what do they participate in? Do you do the varsity level? Do you do the club level? Do you do the recreational level? Do you do it all? If you do it all, how many staff members are you going to hire? Where are they going to be located? And that was where we were at 4 years ago. We hired in 3 people. Myself was one of them. The administration didn't know what to do with us. They said, here, make a program, have a title, do stuff. And, it's luckily we had three great people from different backgrounds. My background was in higher ed, so I knew how to do the programmatic side of things. I knew how to build curriculum connections. I knew how to teach. I knew how to get the kids motivated. I had another guy who worked with me that knew the recreational side of things. He knew how to manage the club sports teams, the recreational sports teams. And then I had another that was from Esports itself. So we got the full range of people into the program that really helped kick it off the ground. That's not always the case for a lot of institutions, and I think they end up biting off more than they can chew, where they hire one person to manage esports at the university, and they say, go do it all. Be the head coach, be the director, be the coordinator, be the student engagement liaison. Go have fun engaging 10% of your population by yourself. That doesn't work. Sorry, Jeff, that doesn't work though, and you well know that doesn't work. I mean, it works, but there's going to be components that are missing because of it, or there's just not enough human capacity to fill a program like that. And I think colleges see the value of it, but they don't necessarily see the scope of the engagement. And that's something that we are changing currently. And I think a lot more colleges, as you can see in the hiring processes right now, there's 50, 60 colleges that are currently hiring for an esports coordinator, director, head coach, whatever it might be. They're seeing the value there. And as that expands, the programs will expand along with it. As you start to see more programs have 3, 4, 5 full-time staff members that just do esports, you'll start to see these programs grow as well.
I think the frustrating part, is when you're growing an esports program from the ground up, and you see these other programs that are out there like swimming or soccer or whatever, and they're having posters on campus, and there a lot of communication, and they're in the student paper, and you're trying to convince everybody on campus that this is just as legitimate, that video game playing competitively is something that people are excited about and is newsworthy, and that to me was the hardest part, was just convincing everybody and being that one stop shop of doing all the marketing, doing all the tournament organizing, dealing with all the teams, trying to get all the club together. So it's not easy. And there's a lot of schools out there. We formed a group called the Oklahoma Association of Collegiate Esports. And it's just really a Discord server, because there wasn't a lot of communication even between all the universities in Oklahoma. So we did that, and that's been a godsend for a bunch of universities that are just starting out. They ask us a bunch of questions, and so I think the more that this area grows and the more that it becomes ingrained in education, I think that'll maybe become more legitimate in the eyes of the rest of the administration and things like that.
I think it's getting there. I think we'll get there sooner rather than later. One number that I always go back to with that too is that if you look at a typical staff position or a faculty position at most schools, you're looking for them to have, on average, somewhere in the 1 to 40 to 100 range of students that they're in contact with, they work with on a regular basis. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but it's in that range, maybe 1 to 100, right? 1 teacher, 1 staff member, 100 students. Ask any esports program out there how many students they interact with on a daily basis. The number is like 1 to 2,000. It's 20 times the interaction that you're getting with a typical staff member, or 10 times at the very least at most of these programs. That number alone, I think, is changing a lot of what a lot of colleges think about esports. And then also, too, the vast majority of the students that we engage with these programs are not students that have engaged with other programs on campus. And that's really where we're finding a lot of the success with the program is we're taking students that traditionally didn't have an outlet on campus for community type activities, and they didn't get the benefit of being in college, right? You didn't get to find a club to hang out with. You didn't have a group of students on campus that you regularly did activities with or met up in person. You were being denied that, and because of that, your retention rate and your graduation rate is being driven down. They've even done studies where your average income after college is driven down because of that. Now the students that are part of these programs are getting those same opportunities. They're getting the opportunities to connect with students on campus, raising the retention rate, raising the average graduation rate, and then raising potentially even your income later on in life because of that.
So much for that. So this next question's for Jeff. I just want to make sure that we get to squeeze in all the questions so that nothing goes to waste in this informative 2 hours. So Jeff, as the chair of game design and animation, as well as the esports director, are there any similarities between how we approach pedagogy or the development of these programs? What are the ways esports and game development programs can really build off of one another? Oh, you're muted.
I was been thinking about that question, and I think the biggest connection that we can have between, say, game design and esports education is this idea of experiential learning. And I think that one of the things that we try to do is get our students to the point where they can go and experience an internship. I can teach them a lot in the classroom, but it's never going to teach them as much as they're going to be in a studio with a deadline and those type of things. As well as I think in esports, I think we can talk about esports and we can talk about esports theory and game theory and health and wellness and psychological ramifications. But until they're in that environment experiencing those issues, I think in terms of pedagogy, it should be wrapped around the experience and the practical application of being in that environment and doing those things personally.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. So this is a question. So pursuing esports and game development is still blocked by the different ways that race, gender, and class intersect. What specific initiatives, if any, do your programs have to diversify all these opportunities to provide equity and inclusion? What work is there to be done, and what do you realistically envision for the future, and what do you hope for the future? It's a bit of an open mic, so anybody could take this question first.
I'll take the first part of it. So for us, we took a stab at the low-hanging fruit first, and for us, the easiest piece to address was the disparity in access, which has a lot to do with the class disparity. You see primarily engagement in esports with the middle and upper class because that's who can afford, one, the machines to do it, and two, the time to do it as well. So we started off with the idea that engagement within the program here at Akron would cost nothing to the students. So it comes from the general fees, but it does not raise their general fees in any way. There is no fee to access the space. The only fee to access the space is that they continue to do well in school. So we do monitor grades. But outside of that, we looked at the ability for students who couldn't afford this equipment to come in and utilize the spaces as a way to level the playing field. And we've seen students that would have never throughout their college career been able to afford to play in an esports competition or even engage in esports and gaming because of the personal cost that it would have been to them financially. So we have 92 PCs, is 30 some console stations that students can come in and utilize. They can utilize the broadcasting space, and we give them access to that to help bridge that gap. And in addition to that, we help do community outreach to some of the local high school programs that wouldn't be able to afford it and give opportunities to the high school students to come to campus, or we bring things to them on occasion to engage in that, to get them another healthy outlet for an experience that can help them get connected with something they're passionate about.
Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to address that question or add on to it?
So I have a question for Eunice, because I was just, the statistics for women and underrepresented minorities, which is always what I'm trying to drive up, are still really low in esports. And so how are you thinking about that topic when you're designing your curriculum, and also what do you see as driving those markets as of participants, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love talking about this topic. And I think there's a couple different factors here, right? So if we're talking about, fortunately, I'm talking about building stuff behind the scenes for business people. And so it's a safer, slightly safer space for women in that sense when it comes to gaming. I know when it comes to sort of a camera, being in front of the camera, like being a host or being a streamer or being a pro player, like that's a lot harder because now they have to face, harassment publicly versus, something in the workplace, which is a totally different story, but similar vibes. And, I just had this conversation recently with Cloud9, who they have a training ground. So they actually coach 13-year-olds to 18-year-olds on becoming better players. And the woman who runs it, she was like, how do I get more female coaches? And I said, well, you're looking at a couple different factors, because when you're playing a game, it's hard to have a safe space as a woman because you face that sort of public, semi-public harassment in a game, right? And so because it's not a safe space and there's no sort of female role models, then like women who even try to play or become better at playing so that they can coach others in gameplay specifically, the barrier is just super high. But, with what we're doing at universities and colleges, if we're focusing on a lot of the professional careers, I mean, that's where it starts, right? So game dev, if you have a lot more inclusive environment, making more inclusive games, then it sort of gets the ball rolling. With esports, it's similar. I would say that now seeing Valorant, for example, become a huge, huge game from Riot Games, they have done such a great job in actually putting money against female-only tournaments, women-only tournaments. They partnered with a lot of LGBTQ organizations, a lot of different orgs around underserved groups to really help promote that. And the game itself is very inclusive. You see people of characters in the game of different shapes and sizes and, genders and things like that. So yeah, I would say, for me, when I'm building the professional curriculum, two things, like the culture I'm building is really around learning and self-improvement. So it's not always just about the technical knowledge. It's having a safe space where you can learn that technical knowledge and that you're surrounded by people who actually encourage you in that. And so you feel like you're with like-minded people and feel encouraged to learn, right? And you probably all know this from the university space. And with that, I mean, I was just brainstorming this yesterday with the coaching person where, okay, well, what if we literally build a boot camp? So Inlight would have, let's say, a 3-week boot camp that teaches someone how to be a coach. And we will take someone who knows nothing about the game, who knows nothing about coaching. And in 3 weeks, we run them through training exercises, videos, analysis. We have them shadow the best coaches in esports. We literally run them through a boot camp professionally. And at the end of it, they have something on their resume. We source internship opportunities and interviews for them. And it's just one of those like sort of continued learning, educational certificates or something like that, right? But on top of that, working with whether it's universities or esports companies to do scholarship programs, right? So now we can have free scholarships for women and underserved groups that can get access to this knowledge for free. And it's covered by the universities, it's covered by esports companies who want to encourage diversity. You know, really it comes down to two things: having a safe space and having that technical hands-on knowledge accessible to everyone so that we can make it more equitable. And, you know, I think so many orgs and colleges and people are doing amazing things around this. So like, you know, I would love to see it all come together. And I guess this indirectly answers the main question, which is, yeah, I'm super encouraged to see the industry grow and just, you know, seeing all the interest from all kinds of different people. Because, you know, it's one thing we always like to say is gaming is for everyone, right? You behind the computer screen, everyone is just a person. So it has to be for everyone. So that's something I'm super excited about.
I think it's also important too that, you know, that education reflects all these issues that we're dealing with right now in terms of maybe a historical perspective. So, I mean, we're going to eventually start to see history of esports, you know, in degree programs, and when these topics are covered in those lectures, it's going to bring a whole new structure, you know, to support more equality and better ways to deal with you know, microaggression and some of these other issues that are going on in esports. And you know, for us, you know, being a part of an educational environment, it's our duty to make sure that these topics are spoke about. So,
Yeah.
One big thing that's helped us a lot, and it may seem really small to anyone who's in the chat, but removing any aspect of anonymity in the gaming communities that you have on campus or at your school. So if you're using Discord, if you're using any type of chat way that the students are engaging, removing the ability to have their in-game name as their primary way of communication in those channels has helped a millionfold, because it takes away their ability to hide behind that screen name in things that they wouldn't say in an in-person environment, wouldn't do in an in-person environment. But because of the nature that they've been brought up with in these video games, they act in a toxic manner, and they act in a toxic manner primarily targeting someone who's different than them, whether that's a female gamer, whether that is a minority gamer, whether that's someone that is just has a different opinion than them. And if you set up the community in a way, or help structure the community in a way to remove that anonymity, you don't give them the opportunity to do that. And you know, we've taken all the steps that we can to remove that, and we have so few issues with toxicity because of it. It's really improved the environment for everyone.
Just to chime in with my personal experience, so when EGD Collective was just a club at Hunter, I was running the League of Legends division for 2 years, and that was a feat in of itself, because it was one of the more popular games. Everybody wanted to play seriously, competitively, but I met a lot of issues as a result, because I was one of the few female leads within the division, and so at the very beginning, I felt a need to like kind of prove my competency, just because I was a girl, and I felt like I found a lot of times where I was like shirking my own confidence, where I was like, oh, I probably don't have as much experience, I can't really do this, or I can't really do that to the same extent as like my other friend who has like a wider skill set for the game. But I eventually found my way into like leading, because, you know, I felt like I might have lacked what I lacked in game knowledge. I had more than made up for in terms of like my leadership capabilities. And I kind of just let that carry on from there. But what I noticed was that a lot of girls who were coming into the college, going into the club, wanting to participate in the events, they felt very intimidated because it was very male dominated. And so a lot of them started like kind of like centering around me, they'd come and ask me for advice. And I felt like being able to be there to provide the advice, being able to like give them the confidence booster, it really kind of like ignited more passion in me to like be a better leader, more capable leader. And I like to think I did a good job. For our lack of resources, our League of Legends varsity team made it to playoffs. Didn't matter that it didn't happen again, but it mattered that we made it the first time. And so it was really encouraging to see those things change. And then I noticed a lot more about what I had to do as a leader to promote a better environment, because I would tell my players that on no level is toxicity or unsportsmanlike behavior allowed. Like, it didn't matter if they did it while they were away from the team. It was just unacceptable on any regard, on any level. And if I ever caught them with it, it was automatically, they're just off the team. And so I felt like that kind of sentiment needs to really be built up too, because a lot of people kind of dismiss it. They're like, that's not the most unsportsmanlike thing you could say, so it doesn't really count. But then the thing is that it shouldn't have come to the point where you have to defend it to think about, oh, that's not the most unsportsmanlike. It just matters that it is unsportsmanlike, so it shouldn't be allowed. So yeah, it really helped to put a lot of things into perspective. And yeah, I really appreciate what you brought up, Eunice.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it for all of my group, you know, giving everybody an opportunity to have a voice and tell their story and tell their experiences, it educates everybody on, you know, what their actions and their things that they say in Discord, and the things that even in game sort of things that they mention can have huge impacts on people. And so, you know, for us at OCU, I want to give our students as much opportunity, you know, outside of just game playing, where we're getting together and getting to know each other, and having times where we discuss issues like this. Every Friday we have a class called the Huddle, and so it's not, you know, they're not game playing, they're not you know, VOD reviewing or anything like that. It's just talking about issues like this. And so I really appreciate your sharing that story.
We still have like about 7 more minutes before we really have to wrap up. Are there any like closing remarks or sentiments that you'd like to leave our viewers or anyone who might be watching the VOD later on YouTube?
One quick thing to add to that last conversation is that one other thing that can be really helpful in that regard is changing the entire perspective of the university into that this is something that can't be allowed. So I'm fully behind the zero tolerance policy, but a lot of the times it has to go beyond just the gaming club on campus. So one thing that we looked at doing from the onset was writing this language into the general student code of conduct. And it's more or less already there in most student codes of conduct at university, but it isn't explicitly stated that this type of communication isn't okay in a digital form within a game happening between students at the university. So we added in that language specifically, which really made it, then we just link back to the student code of conduct and say, you're breaking the student code of conduct, and there are serious implications for that at any institution. It's not just you're breaking the code of conduct for our gaming club, but now it's a lot more serious as well.
That's really important. And also, I love that they can't hide behind their usernames. And because that's been such a problem, right? And Jeff, I love that you guys have the huddle. That's really important to have those conversations, let the students be heard, and be able to talk about and process. Sometimes they can have, I would imagine, experiences that are really upsetting that they need to process. And to give them a safe space to do that is very exceptional. I feel like that's really important. And so both of you with your universities, I am thrilled to see the steps you're making to make it more comfortable for people that are outside of sort of the traditional idea of who is playing esports. And Eunice, I love the boot camp. I love that idea so much. What a great thing to do to give people that are outside of the traditional sphere the space to gain skills that they may not be able to get otherwise. That's innovative. I've loved it. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think every one of us here is doing really cool things and would love to continue the conversation. And, you know, everyone here that has been watching so engagedly the last two hours, it's been awesome to hear all your questions and chat with you. And yeah, this has been great. I very much enjoyed it.
I think a responsibility that we have as academics and programs is to educate the community around us about these topics. I know there's a lot of groups out there that are not related to our university that, you know, they put on esports events. And so for me, I want to be an example for our community as a whole in Oklahoma, so that we really change esports itself, or we change game design and animation on a larger whole. So being involved with community organizations really helps my students see that it's a broader scope. I mean, we work with the Special Olympics Oklahoma. We work with a lot of the Heart Association and the American Cancer Society, and I want to show them that it's much bigger, that their impact that they can have with esports or with gaming and animation doesn't necessarily mean, okay, I'm going to go make the next Call of Duty, which is perfectly fine if they do, and I love that. But I also want them to be able to say, hey, what I've made has educated people or helped people relate to society better, or, you know, has helped people heal more, you know, things like that. So I really appreciate being on this panel with everybody.
The shared sentiment, everyone is really, really happy to have made these connections today. I'm especially ecstatic. It's really great. So if there aren't any further closing remarks, we can end the panel a little bit early, so that if you guys like to, you guys can tune into all the other wonderful panels that we have left for today. I believe there's like 10 more or so different panels going on after this one, so there's a lot for everyone to kind of get interested in. And yeah, we could, if anyone would like to network, we have our networking tab open and available for anyone who would like to connect. And our expo is also open, so that if anyone would like to check out all the cool games that we have to offer from all of our exhibitors, that's also something that you can do. Support the games industry, especially the indie games industry. All right.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for co-presenting. That was fantastic. I had fun.
Thank you, everyone. This was so great. Thank you for moderating and for EGD for organizing this.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your moderating the panel. You did a really great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You did an excellent job moderating. I really appreciated that you shared some of your stories to incorporate into the panel. I thought that was incredibly valuable, since you have the student experience. And I've really loved meeting everyone. I think this has been my favorite panel ever.
Wow, ever. High praise. I love it.
Well, if we have you back next year, Suzanne, we're gonna need to work really hard to beat this.
Ratchet it up.
All right, so thank you all so much. And again, if you missed any parts of this, this will be available on YouTube as a VOD later on. So don't worry, you can always also reach out to anyone here. I'm assuming it's free for all for anyone to kind of add on LinkedIn and ask a couple of questions here and there.
I am super open to connecting, and I just put my LinkedIn. I saw that Jeff did, so that was clever. I copied you.
Well, I love these sort of panels and getting to meet new people, and it's always an enriching experience, later on, even after, several days later or weeks later, to have these friends that you've met and to see them again on other panels. So I hope to see all of you again, and, thank you very much.
Thank you.